Welcome back to On the Clock with Steve Shoup. We're going to be doing a weekly NFL draft show here on the Fanspeak Network now that the NFL draft season is officially underway. And of course, I'm joined by our resident NFL draft expert and my brother, Steve Shoup. Steve, how are you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Always love talking NFL draft.
Absolutely. Well, Steve is, of course, the co-creator of fanspeak.com with me and the creator and mastermind behind On the Clock, the mock draft simulator that we created all the way back in 2013. So we've been at this for a while. We love seeing people use On the Clock. We love seeing people share it either on team sites and having conversations or on Twitter. So please keep using On the Clock, sharing it and using it as a good tool. But now we're going to talk some NFL draft, and we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start with the top 10 picks. And Steve, the top 10 picks are really interesting this year, basically because of the team needs of the teams in the top 10 and kind of just the way the big board is shaking out and kind of obviously what we all know is a weaker quarterback class. So how would you explain as to why this year the top 10 picks could be so interesting?
I think you have a couple different general things. The biggest one being the quarterback situation. As we've seen recently, quarterbacks just go in the top 10. They go in the top five, they go in the top two. Even last year, the year where everyone's college season was pretty much ruined by COVID, we saw quarterbacks go right off the bat. So, this year nobody's talking about that, and some of that is because of the way how some of the team needs are in the top five, top 10.
Right.
But the weaker quarterback class is definitely a factor here because it opens things up for some of these other elite talents at other positions to get those selections. And then the final thing that really makes this unique is you have two teams with multiple top 10 picks. Both the Jets and the Giants, due to their various trades, have two picks in the top 10. So you have them as situations that could be prime trade spots or situations where they are taking, if they're not going to quarterback or they're not going at a certain position, they're taking two guys and pushing those types of players down. So, I think that makes it really interesting and unique as well.
Right. And would you say, I mean, obviously, looking at the teams picking in the top 10, a lot have picked a quarterback recently or are going to stick with their quarterback and may not have that need. Or some may just, as you said, with a weaker quarterback class, not feel like the value is there. Um, of all the teams in the top 10, which do you think is the most likely to pull the trigger on a quarterback?
I think the most likely to pull the trigger on the quarterback is going to be the Panthers. Maybe the Broncos, very close second. But for the teams picking where they currently are, I think those would be the ones potentially picking a top 10 quarterback. You definitely do a situation where, say, a team like the Lions or a team like the Texans, say they trade back into the lower portion of that top 10. Maybe they would feel the urge there to take a quarterback. There's a lot of different scenarios for those teams playing out as well. But for where they're sticking, Panthers and then Broncos.
Right. And of course, we're, having this conversation in February. A lot's going to change as the draft season progresses and as of course, free agency occurs. Do you see this year any potential if a quarterback really does, rise and set himself apart of like a team trading into the top five with one of these teams for a quarterback? Or do you think because the quarterback class is so much weaker, no, the value is not there to trade into the top five?
But I do think top five is interesting because you do have the Panthers sitting there at 6. So if they've not addressed their quarterback via free agency, and we've even seen some teams, spend some money in free agency or via trade and still take a first-round quarterback. In recent years, it's more rare, but it has happened. So I do think with the Panthers sitting there at 6, and the other factor is you have teams like the Jets and the Giants who do have multiple first rounders and multiple top 10 picks. So they could look at it, let's say a team, the Browns at, I believe, 13 want to trade up to number 4 with the Jets. The Jets could say, hey, we have the 10th overall pick. We'll get the 13th plus a bunch of other picks.
Mm-hmm.
We're still getting essentially 2 top 10 talents, maybe not the 4th overall pick talent that we would have taken, but you're still getting two excellent talents plus a bunch of other assets. So Giants could be looking at the same thing, especially if they're getting future picks for next year, which could be a stronger quarterback class, since it does look like they're going to give Daniel Jones one more year. So
Right.
that I think is a big factor. I think Giants and Jets at 4 and 5 are definitely the prime spots to trade back. I think the Texans know they need a lot of talent, so they would look to trade back. And there's even been talk of the Lions being interested in trading back also, but I just don't know if anyone's going all the way up to number 2, all the way up to number 3 and taking a quarterback, just because the price is pretty high. We saw it last year with Trey Lance trade.
Right.
That's a lot of picks that the 49ers gave up. And I just think that you got to really love a guy, and especially if you feel like you might be able to make the same trade 2-3 picks later, why spend that much more? So we'll see. But yeah, I think one of these quarterbacks would really have to blow a team away to do that.
Right. And to your point about the Jets and the Giants, the Lions also have 2 first-round picks. The one is just much later, right?
Yes, and that's another situation why whether they trade back into lower in the top 10 or top 15 and would be interested in a quarterback. They've talked about, when you give Jared Goff another shot, maybe, kind of building it for next year when they would maybe then look to draft a quarterback. But the other thing that the Lions could do is say, hey, we'll take the second overall pick, whichever elite talent we feel is great for that spot. And then, right now we don't know if it's going to be 31 or 32, depending on the outcome of the Super Bowl, but we'll trade up from that spot to get our quarterback in the middle of the first round.
Right.
And it's far less prohibitive to trade up in that sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So why don't we go kind of team by team? And if you were in charge of these teams, you don't have to make a pick. It's not like we're trying to do a mock draft right now. Again, it's early. There's a lot that still needs to happen, especially the way free agency will change things. But if you were in charge of these teams, kind of like, how would you handle the situation? So let's start with the Jaguars at number 1.
The Jaguars, I think, are the easiest just because I don't think anyone's trading up to number 1. Again, Giants and Jets, if they really fall in love with one of these edge rushers, could, but I just don't see them using all their assets just to jump up a few spots. So I think the Jaguars are going to primarily decide between one of the 2 elite pass rushers, Kayvon Thibodeaux or Aiden Hutchinson, and potentially Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama. I think Neal makes the most sense of what they need to help make Trevor Lawrence
Is that the
better.
biggest need?
But they just drafted the other Josh Allen edge rusher a couple of years ago, so that's definitely not as big of a need. So I mean, if the trade's there, they're going to take it. But I think they probably end up going in picking between one of those 3 guys. We'll see what their free agency brings. If they can go out and get some offensive line help, then I think they just take the best player available. If they feel it's Thibodeaux or Hutchinson. So I would guess that's the way they end up going.
Okay. And we kind of talked about it a little bit already, but what would you do with the Lions situation?
I think the Lions, they've been open about wanting to trade back. I don't know if a deal would materialize. I think for them, I again grab just one of these top couple of talents. They need a lot of defensive help. We know this. They could use Neal, though they took Penny Sewell a year ago. So I think they go with whichever edge rusher is not taken by the Jaguars. And if both are available, then they pick whoever they feel is the best one.
Right.
Potentially a corner like Derek Stingley Jr. or Ahmad Gardner could be enough. They went corner a couple of years ago when they had a high pick. So I think they go edge here. Again, would potentially make a deal if it's there, but I doubt that occurs.
Sure. Okay, so that takes us to 3 and the Houston Texans. What would you do with that situation?
So I think the Texans is where it becomes a little interesting because not only could they not only do they have this pick, but you have a real situation where if they trade Deshaun Watson, they could be picking up another first-round pick in this draft.
Right.
So that could go a long way to determining, if they, whether they give Davis Mills a year or not. That remains a lot to be seen. He ended the year strong, but I think we all know that he is, even if he is an NFL starter, he's back end of the league, and nothing wrong with that. but it's just where they are right now. I think there could be a potential trade, and not even, for a quarterback, but you could have a situation where, a team like the Giants with having 5 and 7 could say, hey, we are in love with, Evan Neal, or we are in love with Hutchinson, who's still on the board, and we will give you a 2nd and 3rd and whatever else to just move up a couple spots. So, I think the Texans are kind of in a unique spot right now. But if they keep this pick, I think they should go with Evan Neal would be my pick here. I know we're not doing a full mock draft, but I think that's where they need to go. Potentially a wide receiver if one stands out. This looks to be a deep wide receiver class. Garrett Wilson might be the only one who goes in the top 10 with the Jameson Williams injury situation. Right. But so if they fall in love with Garrett Wilson, I could see them. They need another weapon with Brandon Cooks for sure, whoever their quarterback is. So I think they need to go offense a little bit more. But Lovie Smith's a defensive guy, and he might look. It's a very strong defensive draft at the top. So I think if they need to determine what they do best in free agency, what they address more of. But right. I think they're in a good spot with a number of really elite talents still available at this spot.
Sure. Well, then that takes us to number 4 with the Jets, who are at 4 and 10. So what do you do if you're the Jets?
So, and this is where the Jets, unlike the Giants, who we'll get to next pick, have no interest in the quarterback. There's not even that remote thought. They took Zach Wilson. He struggled early on. He had some better games down the stretch, and you just got to build around him. So I'm looking for offensive talent right here. I think Neal, Garrett Wilson, those are the 2 primary guys. There's other really good offensive linemen. Maybe they end up liking Akeem Kunua from NC State, or Charles Cross, or one of those other really good offensive linemen. I think they just need to keep building that. They've put some picks into the offensive line the last couple of years. Due to injuries, it hasn't panned out as much as they hoped, but they need to build around Zach Wilson, and I would prioritize offense here. You do have the advantage of that other first rounder. Maybe you put both on offense. Maybe you do one offense, one defense. I would like them to take the best offensive player here, and I really like Garrett Wilson. I think he is a riser, and we don't see many top 5 receivers, but when we do see one like Jamar Chase, they do typically pan out in recent years.
Yeah, would you like to see them stick with offense at number 10 if that's where they stay at too?
Yeah, I think it will somewhat determine how the board is. The way I look at it is there's still probably going to be a really good offensive lineman at the 10th spot. So that's why
if they get Wilson at 4.
Yeah. So if you take Wilson here at 4, then I think you can double down on what you've done on offensive line the last couple of years and grab another potential day 1 starter. And now you've added 2 big pieces to go with Zach Wilson. I think that's the best for their long-term future.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, that takes us to number 5 with the Giants. And again, they are at 5 and 7. So what do you do if you're running the Giants?
So I think with one of these 2 picks, I would actually end up very surprised if they end up drafting in both of these spots. I think what they did last year, they traded back for the Bears to take Justin Fields. And I think they'd like to do the exact same thing again. Move back, still have a pick in this first round, whether it's the 5th or the 7th one, but get assets for the next year.
Sure.
And I think that's why they're talking about, we're just going to give Daniel Jones 1 more year to kind of see what's there. But we've also heard some interesting rumors lately that everyone from Saquon Barkley to their first rounder last year, Kadarius Toney, could be on the trade market. And I think they realize they need to build for the future. They've added all these young assets over the years, or gone out and signed free agents like Kenny Golladay or Nate Solder and stuff like that. And it's not gelling. It's not working together. So I think they're going to really look to stockpile for the future. So I think whether they feel they can get the deal done at 5 or at 7, I think they're going to take the best deal possible to get assets for the future, including more picks this year. but I think that seems to be their primary mission. So I would be absolutely shocked if they end up with taking both picks at 5 and 7. I think they'll probably still end up with 2 first-rounders, but at least one of them will be later. So with whichever one you don't take, whether it's at 5 or 7, it's tough. I think there's likely to be a lot of good offensive linemen on the board here. I think there's likely to be some good defenders on the corners I mentioned earlier. Maybe starting that next group of edge rushers. We saw Devin White taken in the top 10 a couple years ago. You typically don't see inside line, off-ball linebackers, but you do have some good ones this year in Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean. Maybe they feel like that's just a can't-miss guy. So I think they should probably just stick with that offensive line and defense. Those are also, if they are building for a long-term future, those are positions that, you can have more longevity. Like good offensive linemen will last in this league for 10 years, 10, 12, 15 years outside of injury concerns. Same with good defensive linemen, same with good linebackers and edge rushers. So I think you can kind of even talk yourself into that being more of a long-term position than, say, wide receivers sometimes. So that would just be the way I go. I'd trade back one and take probably the best defender or offensive lineman with the other pick.
Okay, that makes sense. Now is where it gets a little more interesting because maybe quarterback is in conversation. We touched on this a little bit earlier. We are at number 6 with the Panthers. So what would be your best case scenario, or what would you do if you were running the Panthers?
So, the Panthers, this is, if the Giants had traded and already a quarterback's gone at number 5, then I don't know if the Panthers will double up at quarterback here. But I think if they don't somehow address this in free agency or via trade, I think they need to take a quarterback. We see that the NFC South is absolutely wide open. Tom Brady just retired. Sean Payton just retired from the Saints. Saints have a massive cap situation. The Buccaneers have a ton of free agents. Maybe they would have come back if Brady was there for another year. But, are these guys all coming back? They could have some issues for sure, especially if they need to spend a lot of money to acquire another starting quarterback in Tampa's case. So, and then we know the Falcons, who we'll talk about in a second. They're a team that just these last couple of years has not looked good. They have a major situation brewing with Calvin Ridley. So, this division could be the Panthers, absolutely. And I think you need Christian McCaffrey to stay healthy. That's been a big ask. But you also have DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and a few other pieces there that I think this offense, just a decent quarterback, could get this offense easily into the postseason and maybe even make a nice little run. Their defense is young and talented. They've invested a lot of picks the last couple of years on defense. So, even when they were losing games down the stretch, they rarely were getting blown out, even though their quarterback play with Darnold and Newton and Walker was just terrible down the stretch. So they desperately need a quarterback. I would say that Kenny Pickett's probably the most pro-ready quarterback. Maybe they like Matt Corral also, but they could also address this with the trade or free agency. So this pick actually could be in somebody else's hands if it's via one of the bigger trade options.
Sure.
But even if they sign a Jameis Winston, so if they still end up with this pick, then I think I go offensive line because that's the other issue that they need.
So if they don't take a quarterback, like if they get a quarterback in free agency, then you're going offensive line. If they don't address quarterback, go quarterback.
That would be the way I look at it for them. But boy, I think their offseason is going to be fascinating to watch.
Very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we already talked about the Giants at 7. Now let's talk about the other NFC South team you talked about and the Falcons at 8. What do you do there?
Well, as we talked about, the NFC South is now wide open. Panthers and Saints losing Breeze and Peyton back in back-to-back seasons, and now Brady gone. Falcons can get back on top. Matt Ryan has not looked great these last couple of years, but he's still better than what the Panthers are trying out, and very likely better than what the Saints and Buccaneers could be trying out unless they make a big move. So, I think they need to take a shot. They've added a lot of picks to the offensive line. Some have panned out, some haven't. They could use help there. If they can't convince Calvin Ridley to come back, they could go receiver. I would probably focus on the offense. Their defense has been bad. I would try and address that in free agency. But, I think defense is definitely a possibility, but I would just try and get this offense jump started. You have Kyle Pitts. You have likely they're going to bring Cordell Patterson back. A secondary receiver like Russell Gage, hopefully they can convince Calvin Ridley to stay, if not trade him for enough assets to make it worth their while. But I think they need to get their offense going. Matt Ryan, he's a veteran. I think if you put the pieces around him, he can be good enough to win, especially win this division. So that's where I'm looking to build.
Sure. Okay. And then we have the Broncos at 9. They could be someone that is making moves for a quarterback, obviously, during free agency or a trade. So obviously TBD on, what they're really looking for after free agency. But given the landscape right now, what are you doing with the Broncos at 9?
So, the Broncos, our team, even after trading away Von Miller, that defense was really good. I don't think they need to address defense. I think they can shore up anything via free agency. They have a lot of good young weapons on this team. You need a quarterback. If you can't bring one in via trade and even free agency, how much better are you getting than Teddy Bridgewater with some of the free agents out there? The difference between, say, them and what we just talked about with like the Falcons and Panthers situation is this division is absolutely not easy to win.
It's the opposite.
Not even easy to get a playoff spot in. We saw the Chargers and Raiders go literally right down to the wire to see who would get that final wild card spot. So, Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, you're looking up when it comes to quarterbacks big time here. So I do think, they have a brand new coach. And I think they could go, if they don't get something big done, like the rumored Aaron Rodgers thing, or maybe Russell Wilson, something like that, in which case they won't have this pick.
Right.
So, if they still have this pick, then they probably haven't addressed their quarterback situation. And I'm taking a quarterback, whether it's a guy like Kenny Pickett, who you think can play day one, or a more upside play like Malik Willis, who, take your lumps for a year and see if you get the next really good young quarterback who can sling it and have these fun battles like we've seen Mahomes and Herbert have these last couple of years. So they need a quarterback. There's no doubt about it. And I think if they have this pick, it means they didn't address it in free agency trade. So I would go quarterback here, but
absolutely.
I think they are in a tough spot given the division that they're in for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that rounds out the top 10 because obviously then the Jets have the 10th pick. We covered them already. Any last thoughts on just these top 10 picks of the draft?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we'll see pretty early on in free agency, because I don't think any of these like trade situations, like say Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, those aren't going to last up to like draft day or even mid-April. I think those are going to occur pretty quickly right at the start of free agency. So
right.
I think we will know some of these teams like the Panthers, like the Broncos. We'll also know situations like Calvin Ridley potential trade, things like that. I think what we will see going into April and even probably not on draft day, we typically don't see major moves up on draft day, but anyone moving into that top 3, 4, 5 for a quarterback, we could see that happen or occur early. You'd say that's crazy, but we saw the Jets do it with Sam Darnold. We saw the 49ers do it for Lance. They did it well before the draft day. So it'll be interesting to see if that occurs again, but it could absolutely happen.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be fun to watch. And that is why On the Clock is so important. It's a mock draft simulator. It lets you simulate the 2022 NFL draft. You pick your favorite team or the team you want to simulate for, and you can see plausible scenarios. We talked about it. If you want to look back on our Senior Bowl recap show, kind of the importance of it and showing just it's not trying to predict the draft. It's trying to show plausible scenarios for your team, how the draft could shake out. And we have many big boards that you can try because there's going to be 32 big boards on NFL draft, night one and NFL draft weekend. So right now, I think we have like 6. We're trying to build as many as we can as we get closer to draft season. And so that's really going to really emulate what the NFL draft is going to be like with 32 boards and there's going to be some reaches and that kind of thing. So On the Clock, it helps you learn about players, but it also helps you see again the plausible scenarios. Any other thoughts on that? You were the On the Clock was your brainchild, and any other thoughts on basically what I just said about how On the Clock can help you throughout the draft season?
Well, I think it's especially important that kind of variability for a year like this where we do not know. Last year
Right.
we knew essentially who the top 3 picks were going to be pretty much going into the draft. Before that we knew, it was going to be Burrow and Chase Young pretty much. So a lot of times we know the top 2, 3, 4 picks. We kind of have an idea for sure, but I think this year could be very different, and you could have some interesting scenarios, and it's really going to be interesting to see when that first quarterback goes. Absolutely.
Right. Well, and every year we talk about this, we laugh about this. We always get the no way in hell this guy falls out of the top 5. No way in hell he falls this far. No way in hell he falls out of the first round. Guess what? It happens every single year. We should actually write an article or keep a track of all the guys that people give the no way in hell stamp on. And then it happens for whatever reason. Because again, there's 32 big boards. Not everybody agrees with our big boards or you or me. And so that's what makes the draft so fascinating. That's what makes On the Clock so useful.
Well, and just to point to that, the other with this top 10, and we very well could see trades. And like I said, I truly believe the Giants especially want to trade back and do what they did a year ago,
right?
And with the Justin Fields trade. But we have seen, some recent drafts. I think 2015, I believe 2020, where there wasn't a trade in the top 10. And if that occurs, where do the quarterbacks go? Particularly if the Panthers and/or Broncos have addressed it in the off season. So if those teams already address quarterbacks, there might not be a quarterback taken in the top 10, or if so, it could be very surprised. Maybe the Falcons take their quarterback of the future or something like that.
Right.
So I do think that you just have very interesting situation where most of the top 10 teams seemingly have no interest at quarterback, particularly at where they currently are. So if trades don't materialize, then we might not see a quarterback in the top 10, and it might not all be entirely due to the weakness of the quarterback class. Some of it could simply be we just feel more comfortable with where our pick is in player X. So, let's not forget, Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, while they were the much better quarterbacks than Mitch Trubisky, they were not top 5 picks. They were, I believe, 10th and 12th overall. So, it happens. It happens that elite talents can slide. So I think we should keep that in mind as well.
Right. I think, again, to your earlier point, I think this year is going to have a lot more variability than other years. And again, we'll see as things will get probably a little more clear as the draft season progresses. This year looks like it'll have a lot more variability, which just makes it a lot more interesting. So use On the Clock, our mock draft simulator. And if you want to do trades, if you want to run the entire offseason simulation, you can upgrade to On the Clock Premium or Ultimate GM. We have an annual subscription, so you pay and you have it for the entire year. So check out On the Clock, check out our subscriptions. And Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next week and every week after that, leading up to the NFL draft, talking different draft topics every week. So we really appreciate you guys joining us. If you could follow us on Twitter, you can follow Steve at SteveOSpeak. You can follow me at Megs08DFS. And please, again, be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Fanspeak Network and tell a friend. We would appreciate that too. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you then.
See you later.